Hello and welcome to my garage. Today we're going to go through the procedure of fitting the cylinder head back onto the MGB. First of all, apologies, it's been a while since the last video. We're now coming up to the end of May 2020. It looks like motorsport is going to be back on in July, so now seems a good time to get the cylinder head back on a car and get things ready. Let me start off by going through with you the tools that you need for the job. An important thing before we start is having a nice clear area set aside, nice and clean, so there's no contaminants or bits of metal that could get onto the cylinder head or into the engine when we're reassembling. In terms of tools, we've got a torque wrench here for the that'll be for the final nuts on the head and for the rocker assembly. We've got the these are ARP studs that we'll be fitting back in. I'm reusing the same ones. We've had a look over them. We couldn't see any stretch on them, so they seem good to go again. We've got the push rods here. Again, they're a little bit scabby in places. You've got a bit of rust on these, but they are original ones. I decided to keep these rather than replace with new ones, because with some of the modern parts, the quality just isn't quite so good. Here is our fully refreshed cylinder head. That's all ready to go back in. And then a little trick piece here. We've got an oil stone just for flattening the very top part of the engine. Mine probably doesn't need it because the whole engine has just been refreshed, but I'm just going to show you a technique on that. We've got a couple of deep sockets here. Again, these are bi-hex because we're using the ARP fittings to go back on. We've got our gasket here. I'll be using a Payen gasket in the car. I've used the Chromatic one in the past. I'd have to say of the two, I prefer the Payen. It's an awful lot cheaper, and really it does seem to hold up just as well. So let's go over to the car now, and we'll look at the procedure. So here we are. The engine's back into the car. You can see we haven't got any of the studs fitted yet. It's all nice and clean in here. I'm going to turn the engine over just slightly. The idea being, I just want to drop these two pistons down before we just use our oil stone. We're just going to smooth over this top very slightly. I mean, there's a few tiny little bits here, but I think that's just a little bit of surface marking. Obviously, very important to keep this area totally clean. Once we finish with the oil stone, we are going to go in here and just make absolutely certain there's nothing left over in the cylinders. So you'll be able to see the top of the engine block here. This is the oil stone I was talking about. It's basically just a sort of a knife sharpener, but I use it only for doing the tops of the cylinder head. So it's nice and flat, and it's got kind of build up of light oil on it. Just sort of every time I use it, I just put a bit more on, so it's still retain the oil in it. And all we're going to do is just going to rub this over the top, very gently, and we're just sort of looking out to see if we see any sort of high points or anything. We're just doing a very light, almost a polish on the metal. We're certainly not taking too much off it or anything like that. So we're just going to work around, going across in different directions, just making sure this head surface the block surface is lovely and flat. So we've just been around very lightly with the oil stone now. You can see there's still a few little bits of a bit of corrosion on the head there around these water pipes. I'm not going to go too deep and start trying to dig them out. We've just sort of just gone over the top of the surface, just to sort of flash it off and make sure that there's nothing, no unevenness in the top of the block there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the shop vacuum cleaner just to go into each of these, just to make absolutely sure no little bits of sort of grindings or things that have got stuck into there. Now with our head all cleaned up, we can now start fitting our studs back in. I use the ARP studs. They're really nice quality. They are a little bit expensive, but I do think they are worth it, certainly on a performance engine. They have a very nice little hex cap on them, so you can put them in using a hex wrench or an Allen key. If you haven't got that sort of fitting in the top to put the Allen key in, the best way I think is to put two nuts onto the top part of the stud, and then when you put it in, you can use a spanner, lock the two nuts together, and then use that to push them in, rather than trying to use a sort of a stud extraction tool or anything that can damage the thread on these. We're going to start off with these are the ones that go all the way through the head, and the rocker assembly too. These are the longer ones, so we've got 4 of these at the back. So let me just put this one down. I'm going to use a little bit of a very light thread lock. It's a Loctite 243, which I think is a medium strength. The only reason I do this is I do find sometimes that when I try and retorque the head nuts, otherwise the whole stud assembly will move. So hopefully that'll stop that happening. So I'm just going to pop these 4 in first of all. Just to show you very briefly on the studs here, you'll see that on one end you've got a fine thread, and on the other end you've got a coarse thread. The coarse thread is the one that goes down into the block, so they'll go in that way with a fine thread at the top and the coarse at the bottom. We'll just give that a little nip up with a hex wrench. There isn't a specified torque on these. Obviously there is a torque on the top section. I'll just pull these in until they're snug. You really don't want to overdo them. So let me just go around now and get the 4 back ones in place. So that's our 4 longer head studs in place. I'm just going to wipe off any of this thread lock that's just come out of the threads. Just wipe that down. So as we said earlier, the cleanliness here is super important to make sure that nothing drops down into these, and we will be going around again before we put the head on, making sure everything's right. So let me go on now, and we've got the shorter of the studs here, and these go in, I think, the remaining 7 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Obviously you've got water jacket ones here too, but you will see that they're not threaded, and I don't think, you probably should, you can't really mess the 2 up, I don't think. So let me start on these, and just the same as I did with the other ones, a little squirt of a medium thread lock, and I'll just get those going in now. Okay, so that's all of our head studs in now. Just going to go around and just wipe any thread lock that's got stuck. Now, as it is, the cam followers are already in the engine, so we don't need to fit those. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just give the top of the head another clean over, just to make absolutely certain we've got nothing sort of drop down into the cylinder or anything like that, and make sure this area is nice and clear as well. So a little bit of degreaser. This is just a light degreaser. It's not brake cleaner. It's just a sort of a panel wipe. And again, we'll just go around, just making absolutely sure. So this is the Payen head gasket that we'll be fitting to the car. It's it was a very nice gasket, first of all. Also, it is marked up as well front. I don't know if you'll be able to see this if I try and get that, so you can see it says front on there, and also top somewhere, also top there. So one of the good things about this, it is almost impossible to fit it the wrong way up. I did take a look at the gasket. I couldn't quite see what made the difference between the top side and the bottom side, because obviously you could fit it that way. You could also get it into the car that way. I mean, I noticed there's a slight difference in these edges, so they line up a bit better, but the holes did seem very similar. Anyway, we'll be fitting it the correct way up. So we've got top here and front there. With this gasket, I just put this in dry. I don't bother with a sort of a spray-on gasket seal or anything like that. There is a slight sort of, not ever so tacky, but there's a slight sort of stickiness to the surface. So we'll put this in just as it is. So let me go and drop this into the car now. Okay, so as per the instructions, we've got front here and top here, so we know we're going on the right way. You'll see you've got sort of three holes on the side here with a smaller one in the middle. We're aiming for that sort of smaller one for the head studs, and you should find it just drops on fairly easily. There we go. And you'll very quickly tell if it's out of alignment or not. As it is, that's all sitting exactly where it should sit. So I'm very happy with how that's gone into the car. Again, I'm just going to have a little look to make absolutely certain that we've got nothing down in here before we do the next stage. So that all looks good now. We've got our studs in the correct order. Next job really is going to be putting the head on. So let's get started with that. Our cylinder head is just here. Possibly if you join me for the cylinder head painting video, which I'll pop a link to now, you would have seen that we've done this in the red maroon colour, the same as the rest of the engine. And ever since we've painted, it's been bagged up to try and make sure it stays absolutely clear. So let's get it out of its bag now. And I think for the time being, I'm going to leave that masking tape in place, which is covering up the exhaust ports, and then we'll lift this over and get it onto the car. It is very heavy, unfortunately. I think if you can get a bit of a help doing this, it's a nicer job with two. Unfortunately, I'm on my own today, so it's just going to be me dropping this in. So let's get started on that now. Okay, so as you can see, the head is fairly heavy, and it's unfortunately there's a long extension over the bonnet to get it in place. So I'm going to sort of lean down as much as I can. I'm going to try and get my elbow onto the radiator shroud there. Got the thermostat at the front of the engine. I'm just going to try and hopefully I've got that in the right place. If it's not going on easy, don't try and sort of push it down or anything. Just sort of take your time and locate it. So that's now in. And I think our next job is going to be looking at these push rods at the back. So we'll drop our push rods back in now. They do have a way of going, and you'll have a sort of a cupped part at the top there, and then a sort of a flatter piece at the bottom. So these just drop back in. When we remove them, if you watch the video with me, I'll put a link at the bottom now for the removal video for the cylinder head. You'll notice that we numbered each of these up purely for the fact that when we put the rocker assembly back on, we shouldn't need to adjust the tappets quite so much, but these will just drop back in there, and you'll sort of feel they'll locate themselves into the cam followers. Just make sure it sort of drops all the way in nicely there. So that's the first four. We'll finish up with 5 to 8. So that's 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then I think what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sort of drop the rocker assembly in place, and then I think we'll start on putting some of these, putting some of the nuts and washers on, but not tightening down anything yet. I think we're just going to try and sort of work through, get most of it assembled, and then when we start talking, we'll be doing these ones first, and doing the actual rocker assembly ones afterwards. So our next job, we're just going to put these studs in for the rocker assembly, just as before. A little dash of the blue medium thread lock, nothing too heavy, and I'm just going to pop those in exactly the same as before. You can't mix these up with the head studs because they are a different size. So let me just go down and get all 4 in. So exactly the same as we've done with the other studs. We'll just use the hex key to wind these in. You will see that they're a fine thread at the top and a coarse thread at the bottom, exactly the same as the other head studs were. So you can't put them in the wrong way up. Again, with these, it's only quite a fine hex head on them, so I'm not going to sort of try and put too much torque on them. Just sort of snug them up as long as they're in. So they're just, they're just snugged into place there. I'll just get the cloth again, just to wipe off any of that thread lock that's kind of just come out there. I think on these ones you probably don't need to thread lock them anyway. I just do it mainly on these ones, as I said, for retorquing, but I think for the top ones it's not such a problem. So let me. I think what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go around. And I'm going to get all these nuts started on here. I just use a little bit of assembly grease, so I'm going to pop a bit of that on first. So I'm just using it. It's basically a white waterproof assembly grease. I'm just going to put a bit of it on each of the studs. I think any sort of grease would do. It's just so that they're sort of when you torque them up, they won't sort of be catching on the threads at all. You'll get a nice torque, a nice even torque on them. And then what I'll do, I'll just go and I'm not going to start tightening these up with the socket or anything. But what I'd like to do is just get each of these sort of lower ones in place. So we've got a thick washer, And then we've got this rather nice ARP nut, which is a bihex head. So let me just go around and I'll get all I'm going to get all 7 of these lower ones in place. Okay, so we've got our 7 nuts on here, so we can put our rocker assembly into place. Let me just go and grab that. I do find as well when I try and drop this on, often the rockers move, and well, I can see that one's turning already. So I'm going to hopefully try and just squeeze the ends together enough to drop this in. It can be a pain to fit. Oh yes, that's exactly what I was worried was going to happen. So unfortunately these have all turned. So what I'm going to hopefully try and do is just put a metal ruler across them to sort of hold them down on this end, if they will. And then there we go. Hopefully that has now. So I think that one's tight. That's fine. I think they've dropped into place. So again, we're just going to put these nuts on loosely, and what we'll start off by doing is torquing up these larger ones first once we're ready. So you'll see here you've got a slightly smaller. I think it's a quarter thread UNF on these on the smaller studs. Just checking as well that as you wind this in, that all those push rods have located correctly onto the onto the end of the rocker. So let me just put those in. And also on this final one, you've got a little key. Which just sits like that. There we go. And that's just to keep that sort of. I think there's a little threaded bar in there that just holds the rocker shaft in place. You can't really put this on backwards because obviously you've got smaller and larger holes on the side, and also you will notice on this end one, this one has the oil feed in. On this car, it's an offset oil feed. Just something to consider when if you're looking at replacing the rocker pedestals at all, to make sure the oil feed is the same in that rocker. So there we go. We're just going to pull these down very gently now. Okay, and then we'll do these larger ones. So I'm just going to pause a minute while I get all these just tweaked up by finger tight first. Okay, so this is us largely in place. What I've done, I've just made sure all of these push rods have gone into their corresponding rocker. You can see that the nuts on top here we've just done sort of finger tight, and then the same with these large ones here. But what we're going to start doing now is we're going to start putting a little bit of torque on the. Well, that's just fallen out of position. We're going to start putting a little bit of torque on these larger cylinder head nuts. So let me put the camera back on the tripod, and we'll work round. Now it's important to note that you do have a tightening sequence for these cylinder head studs and the nuts. Basically, you work around in a spiral. So we start off, obviously thermostats at the front here. We start off with number 1, and then we go up to 2, 3. Come back over here. So it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 is the one at the back there. What I'm going to do, I like to sort of do this in 2 stages, well actually 3 stages. To start off with, I'm just going to sort of put a socket on a bar and just pull them down very, very gently, and then we're going to try and put 25 foot-pounds on each of these studs, and then we go to a final squeeze of 50 foot-pounds. So let me just go around first of all, and we'll just get these sort of a little bit more than finger tight, but certainly no torque on them at the moment. Okay, so all I've got at the moment is just a socket with a ratchet on, and we're just going to really gently just pull those round until they stop. That's all I'm doing at the moment. So we'll stick to our. I think I've just done that the wrong way around. I think that should have been number 2 there. So let's stick to our order 2. 4 is here, so again just pinch that down. 5, 6, just until that sort of stops, just using the very end of the socket. 7, So I'm just going to walk around the other side now, just make sure everything this side is sort of located. Yeah, that all looks good. So I'm going to swap over to the torque wrench now. And for this first bit of torque, I'm going to do 30 Newton meters, which I think is about sort of 23 foot-pounds. So let me just sort of start off with this. So we're going to kick off with number 1, which is this one. Just clicked off. I'm just going to get just a top tool for a torque wrench there. So number 2 is we go diagonally across. So let's bring that down. You'll notice these ones are probably a little bit looser, purely because these are being sort of held off by the springs on the valves there. So let's just squeeze this down very gently. There we go. 2. So that was number 3 here. See, these have just got a little bit more movement in them. 11. Now I'm just going to put this to the side. I'm just going to turn these down a little bit more, just finger tight them. We're not using these to sort of hold the head down. It's purely just to keep everything nice and sort of in line, because obviously that key did just pop up a moment ago. So let's just tighten them. And then we're going to do the second wind on these now. So what will we take it down to? It'll be 50 foot-pounds now. So we're ready to do our second round of the torque wrench. So we're going to be looking at the same sort of spiral order as we did previously. So we'll let's start off here. We've got 60, I think 67 Newton meters on a torque wrench, which is the same as 50 foot-pounds. So you'll see it's just going to be a little bit stiffer. But again, we'll just take our time. Just give it a nice gentle squeeze up. There we go. So that's 1. Then we've got 2 up here. Possibly a slightly short wrench. I have got a longer one, but we'll stick with this one for now, I think. Now we're on 10. And finally, 11 down here. So that's them squeezed up. I won't go around them again. What we will be doing once the engine's warmed up, we've probably done a sort of 500 miles, well, probably a bit less than that, probably sort of 50 miles on it. We'll be retorquing all of these anyway. So let's move on to the smaller ones now for the rocker assembly. So we've got our rocker pedestal bolts next. This is just 33 Newton meters. I haven't got a tightening sequence for these, but we'll do a sort of a similar thing. So we'll work in the middle first. Again, we just squeeze these down. I'm just gonna pull all 4 down gently just before I put the torque onto them. So let me just squeeze them down. So let me do that one next. So 2. I think this one might have just clicked as I was tightening it down. There we go, yeah, so that's fine. So that's all those 4 done. Now again, we're just going to have a look along here. We can see all of these pedestals have sort of seated nicely. The the rocks are corresponding with the push rod, so they've all located properly. In my car, you see I've actually got a solid. These are solid spaces. In a normal MG, you probably have just a spring. The other thing you might have noticed is this extended pedestal here that just protects the end part of the rocker shaft. I have seen on quite a few performance MGBs this part of the rocker shaft breaking, so it does seem a sensible upgrade to have. I think these came from Moss. They're reasonably expensive, but certainly I would say worth having. Okay, so let's take a look at the thermostat housing here next. We've got 3 studs to go down into here. You'll be able to see that this there's no sort of, the hole here goes all the way through down into the water jacket of the cylinder. So I tend to put a little bit of a sort of a thread sealant on these as I install them. So let me just pop a bit of that on. The thread sealant I use is a Loctite 577. It sort of goes. It's especially designed for threads that are going to be used in areas where they might get sort of water, sealing fluids. And what we would do, we'll use the two nut method. So we're going to use just going to grab another spanner. So we've got two 1/2-inch spanners here, and what we do, we'll just tighten one nut down onto the other, like that, and then we can get this stud all the way into where it needs to be. We want these sort of fairly snug, and obviously not, so it doesn't need to be over tight. So that's our nut snugged into place. We don't need to overdo it, but again we want it sort of fairly firm. And then to break these off, we're basically going to turn the nuts away from each other again. So the bottom one's going to go down, top one's up, and we'll just wind that off. And what I'll do now is I'll go around and do all 3 of these. So now we're going to put the thermostat cover on. Obviously, if you were using a thermostat, you want to fit that in now. On this car, we basically just got a blanking sleeve instead, so that takes the place of the thermostat. I have either the cork gasket or this. I think it's a Klinger seal one, which comes from Moss. It's a sort of a green colour, but it's actually, I do find it's quite a useful gasket. A little bit tougher than a cork, possibly. If you take it off, you can most likely reuse it. So let me just going to do a very quick test fit. It all seems to be sitting on there quite well. Obviously this is the I think it's pre-66 radiator, so it's going it will go a slightly different way to yours. On the later cars this output is on this side of the engine instead. So let me just lift this out again, and what I'm going to do is just put a tiny, not very much, a little bit of this sort of sealant just on and around this gasket. This is a sealant called Well Sealed by Stag. I think there's sort of lots of things that are similar, like non-setting Loctites and various similar things. So I'm just going to, again, just a tiny little, and then we'll just rub that over, so it's a sort of a smoothish, and then I think that came off like that. They are handed, these bits, so they will only go on one way. Then let's pop our thermostat cover on. Now what I have at the top is just these are nice aluminium washers. So just a flat washer that sits in here. I might just put another little drop of this sealant around on these around on those. So just a little squirt. I just have had these leaking a little bit in the past, which is it tends to be not really a big problem, but if we can avoid it, we will do. So that's that. Then we'll just pop our washer on. I'll do another little bit of this as well, because that washer's won't move most of that off. And these are our thermostat nuts. I had some of these ARP ones left over. That's the only reason I'm using these. A normal one would be absolutely fine to use here. The other thing I would avoid, don't use the spring washer on here, because it will cause it to leak. So just a nice smooth aluminium washer, and pull it down. I'm going to see if I've got a torque in the book for these nuts. I couldn't see a torque for them, so I'm just going to squeeze these down to It's going to do this at 20 Newton meters, really not too much. What I might find is if it does leak, I'll give them a little squeeze if they're not quite sealing. So just a nice gentle pull up, not too much. The last thing I want to do is start breaking these studs. So that was the first one, just clicked. There we go, 2 and 3. So just a little wipe down of this sealant that's come off, and that is our thermostat cover fitted. Okay, so we're back around now to the exhaust side of the engine. Let me just move this bonnet prop out of the way, and we're going to put these. We've got these. Is it 6 or 5? We've got these 6 studs along here for the exhaust. You've got a long and a short part on the thread. Hopefully that's just going to focus now. What we'll be doing is this the shorter part of the thread will be going into the block. It's a fine thread on both ends, so it is possible to put them in the wrong way. But I think if you just look for the shorter thread, that's what goes in first. I'll be using just a bit of my usual. This is the aluminium grease, which is this I use as an assembly sort of grease. And then these we just put in gently. And what we'll be doing, I'm just going to get these sort of started. And we'll be doing the same method as we used on the thermostat housing, which will be fitting sort of two nuts to them and then just tightening up. So let me just go down and I'm just going to get all six in, and then I'll show you the sort of tightening up procedure. So our procedure on here is almost the same. Well, it's exactly the same as the thermostat. So we'll put one of these nuts on first, then another one, and if we tighten the outer one down against that inner one, what we have to do is then just wind that in all the way and just give it a little bit of a pinch, not too much, just to sort of snug that home. That'll do. And then lock nuts can come back off again. So I'll go down and do all 6 of these now. So I've got all 6 of these done up now. Let's take off these little cupboards, just the tape I put on, just to make sure nothing fell into the cylinder head when I was doing the painting and that sort of thing. Yeah, just a quick look along, make sure nothing's there, which is fine. I think just for now I'm going to reuse the old exhaust gasket. I didn't really have any issues with it last season, so let's drop that back on. This is a little bit of black around this around the centre exhaust there, but let's see. We'll sort of run it for a bit and see what happens. We'll get the exhaust manifold on next. This is the Taurus Trophy one from us, which is quite a nice system that I run on this car. If you've just got the normal exhaust system, I guess you'll probably see that it's. So have the normal system, you'll probably find that it's sort of here already. You've just got to clip it back on. This is a sort of three-piece one, so it comes in different pieces. That just pushes onto there. I'm just going to get these two nuts on at the end to hold it in position. So again, I've just put a little bit of the anti-seize, the aluminium grease I use. I'll put it across all of them for now. At least that's done. For these 2 end ones, we've got a flat washer and then a spring washer, so they just go on. And I'm just going to put that lightly in place for now. So we just put that one there, and then we've got one at this end. Hopefully, I'm not too much in the way of the camera, so just sort of push pull these up gently. Only very lightly for now, just while we sort of assemble everything else. Let me just pull that. There we are. There we are. So we won't torque any of these up yet, because we're going down and doing this whole thing once we put the carburetor on. So for setting our tappets or sort of valve clearances on this car, what we're sort of looking at is a rule of 9. So essentially, when number 1 valve is pushed down, number 8 will be lifted up. When number 2 is pushed down, number 7 will be lifted up. I tend to do them in order, so I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do them up that way. Also, you've got some of these valves are inlet valves and some are exhaust valves. If you look on this side, the engine you can't see at the moment, but where the carburettor is, you'll know you'll have two inlet valves there. You've got an exhaust here, which was going to be the exhaust valve here, so that's going to be exhaust, inlet, inlet, exhaust, exhaust, inlet, inlet, and exhaust. So there's two different settings for each one, which I'll run through in a moment. What I want to do first of all is I want to get number 8 valve sort of compressed, so that's open, which means that number 1 valve will be closed. So to do this, I've got the car in gear, and what I'm going to do is just roll it. I'd like to move the camera just slightly. I'm just going to try and roll the car so that I can see that number 8 is down. So let me just push it back. Obviously you're pushing against the engine, so there's a little bit of takes a little bit of doing, but we've got the plugs out. So I can see number 8 is going down. Now let me just move the camera slightly so you can see it. So what I'm looking at here is number 8 to see when that drops down. So it's going down, keeps going down, and it's just lifting up. So let me come back a touch. There we go. So I know that number 8 there is open, which means number 2, so which means number 1 is closed. So let me check the valve clearance there. Bear with me. We know that number 1 here is an exhaust valve, so this should have a clearance 24 thou. On this car, all the exhausts are 24 and the inlets are 22. So let me just see. That's a little bit tight in there. So let me just. What I'm going to do. You've got a lock nut on the rear here. We just need to loosen that off. Then all we're doing to sort of increase the gap will be taking this anti-clockwise just a touch, just until that feeler gauge slips sort of underneath. There we go. So that's probably where it needs to be there. So I'm going to hold this in place with the screwdriver and just tighten that back down. And we'll just check again with our feeler gauge 24 thou. And yeah, that fits in there. That fits in there very nicely. So let me just pull that up. And then what I like to do, I just put a tiny spot of paint on there, just to let me know that I've done number 1. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to push the engine. I think I'm going to have to pull the car towards me a bit. And we're going to get number 7 closed so that we can do number 2. On this one, I'll be looking again. We'll be looking for 22 rather than 24 because this is an inlet valve. So let me just loosen it off. Just have a flat screwdriver. Just go a bit more. And so I've got a feeler gauge for 22. So that just slides through there. And again, we'll hold the sort of the threaded part in place with a screwdriver and just tighten that down gently first. Check again, so inlet says 22 and that's loosely there correctly. So again we'll just pinch that down, and I'm going to mark that one. So now we're doing number 3 now. So we want number 6 to be closed, number 6 to be open, which is that one there. We've got 6 there, which is compressed. So that means that valve is open. So number 3 here is going to be closed. So we're looking again. This is an inlet valve, so we need a 22. Looking for a gap of 22 on that one. So that's very close, but we'll just set that down. I do find a nice stout screwdriver useful for this, just so you can sort of grip it well when you tighten the lock nut back up. So we're just sliding this in and out. Not sort of too tight, but just so it sort of grips it nicely around there. Should do. So we'll hold that in and just tighten that down. So again, we're on an inlet which is 22s. and that slides through there fine. What I'll do now, I'm going to go down and do the rest of them, but I'll switch the camera off because hopefully that's giving you sort of the info you need for the procedure. As I said, it's just that rule of 9. So the next one we're going to be doing is number 4. So we want valve number 5 to be open, which is that one there. And then obviously when we do 5, we're looking at 4. When we do 6 there, we'll be back to 3. 7 will be on 2, and number 8 will be on number 1. So we've got all 8 now adjusted correctly. So we'll just go along with the just got a little bit of cleaner on this cloth, and that's just taking that paint marker off. So this is that's all done now. We can look at getting the spark plugs back in the car now. These are just my sort of they're kind of what I call a running around set that I use in a car. They're not the race plugs. The reason I tend to use a sort of a running around set, these have got quite a nice big electrode on them. The race plugs are very, very small on the electrode there, and certainly if you're running around a paddock going to scrutineering and that kind of thing, they do tend to soot up very quickly. An easy way to sort of clean these out, you can see it's burning very nicely. You've got just about the right colour on there. It's a little bit wet on the threads. I just use a sort of blowtorch, and all I'm going to do is just to sort of, let me just get that in focus, just sort of use that. So I've just used the torch there, just on the very end of the plug. I just do it holding it with gloves. As soon as you can feel the heat through the gloves, you know you've done enough. You don't want to sort of overdo this. But let me just show you now. That's kind of got a nicer, slightly lighter tan colour. So I think these plugs will be fine to use again. I will be using brand new race plugs in the car. So let me just go along now, and I'll do all of these. So you can just see they do clean up very nicely with the blowtorch. You can see the sort of the white of the ceramic in there. It's all sort of brightened up quite well. Once I've finished with the plugs, we'll gap them. I tend to use around sort of 30 to 32 thou. It's running electronic ignition, so it does give you the possibility to run a little bit more if you want. So I'll just gap these up. You can see there that just sits. You know, it's sort of using the feeder gauge, putting it in the end of the plug there, and that's fine for what we need. Now on this car I don't actually have a heater valve, so we've just got the heater takeoff there. What I've got is a little basically just an aluminium plate that I made up that just sort of sits in place of the heater valve. I've got the gasket to go on the back, so I'm just going to put a little bit of weld seal onto the face of this. Well, that's probably a bit too much. Let me see if I can just spread that around. So this is that aluminium plate. Bolt to the top. Again, we've just got a flat washer on here. You don't want to use a spring washer. Let me just get that in there and get it started. Yes, let's just hold it in place. And then on the underside one, I've got I've basically got the clip that would often be holding your capillary tube for the heater. Sorry, the capillary tube for the water temperature gauge. So I'm using that just at the bottom. I'm just going to put a little bit of assembly grease on this one. So put the assembly grease on there. Let's just line these up. I'll just put a little bit of the assembly grease on this top one because I forgot to do it the first time round. Let's get a 7/16 socket for this. I have to say this is probably a lot easier than the heater valve. You've got good access to the bolts top and bottom. Let's just get that one most of the way in. Same with the bottom one. And then I'll just have that clip at the sort of 6 o'clock position. Hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing here. Just pull these in. So I think that's seems to have lined up pretty well. So there's a bit of a squeeze, not too much. Line your clip on bottom up where it wants to be. Moving just up to the front of the cylinder here, we've got the takeoff. This is for the water temperature gauge. In my car it's electronic, but the fittings are exactly the same. So we've got, so let me just see how that should route. That's going to come, it's going to come through, and that'll be going in the end there. So I'm going to put a little bit of our usual aluminium anti-seize grease on here. I don't find these tend to leak, so I don't really bother with sort of PTFE or anything like that. They are a sort of a tapered. It's a tapered nut, so it will sort of pinch up on its own. So let's just get that. Just get a spanner to pinch that up. So you want it sort of reasonably tight, so you're sort of squeezing a taper, but not too much. I thought that would about do. And then this just clips to the inner side of the dipstick. Just goes in there, and that just clips into the usual place that you would have this through if it was a capillary tube anyway. And while I'm on the job, I'm just going to drop this down. This is the oil temperature sender. So let me just see, because I haven't ordered it, so that's going to go on first. Down in here. Obviously you probably won't have this in your car. And then what I've got is the back of the alternator, which then just clip that in and just pull the metal tab up. So that's that now done. I'll put the I think I'll leave the spark plugs out for now, because I think we're going to get the rocker cover on next. I think the rocker cover to go on next. On my car, I've got this silicone gasket, just as opposed to the cork one. It's a little bit thick. I find it does seem to work fairly well. In reality, I don't think there's much wrong with the cork one either. The silicone one is possibly a bit easier to reuse though. I've got this polished alloy rocker cover. I spent a little bit of time polishing this up whilst it was off the car. And what we need to do when we fit this is try and sort of. I did try gluing the two together, but it didn't seem to work out. So I'm just going to make sure that that's sat in there nicely before we put these top bolts on. So they just get them started by hand first. And again, I'm just having a look down here just to make certain it's all sitting where I like it to sit, just tucked in a bit on this side. I think that's going to be about where I need it. Just going to make sure we're looking very nice on this side. Let me just have a look. Yeah, that's all sitting sort of where I'd like it to be. So let's start these. Drop it down a bit. So with how this is located, so I'm just going to gently pull this down now, making absolutely sure that silicone gasket stays where we want it to. They do a bit of moving on their own sometimes. And yeah, we'll just give these a gentle pinch down, enough to sort of seal that, make sure that gasket seals nicely. We don't need to over. Just going to take the extension part off just to tighten these up. Yeah, I think that'll do. And just one last bit. So that's that fine. We'll stay on that side now. We're going to get the carburettor fitted next. So fitting the carburettor is fairly straightforward. It's the Webb one rather than the SU, so it may be something different to what you have. The principle is fairly similar. This is quite nice. It all comes off in one piece. So we're going to need one of these, one of the larger washers, and then we've got a spring washer, and then the nut. Unfortunately, I've put this bonnet right in the wrong place where I'm working. So let me just get that started. get the other end in. Let's move this prop as well while we can. There we go. Hopefully that's not going away the camera. I've got that one at the other end. So I'm going to get all sort of 4 of these on and started. They are a little bit fiddly, these ones in the middle here, and I know on an SU they're sort of difficult as well because you probably can't get in behind the card. You'll have to take them off the manifold in order to get them in. So let me just get a socket. So what I tend to do with this, I get the end 2 ones sort of nipped up a little bit, and then we can work on the inside ones. So I also tend to just lift the carb slightly as much as I can. I'll do the same this side. Unfortunately, I'm going to be probably in the way of the camera, which is not ideal. So I just lift those as I tighten up. Just give these a bit of a pinch now because they're all in place. These are the sort of nuts and the studs and bolts. You just want to check periodically on the car because of the sort of heating and cooling cycles. They do have a tendency to come loose. So I do. So certainly every race meeting I'll be checking these. They're one of those bits just to keep an eye on. So we've just got a half each ring spanner to. What we're doing here is these middle ones just to pull that in nice and tight. I haven't got a torque for these. I mean, I just do them by hand. Just give them a good squeeze. Probably around 20 foot-pounds. I'd have thought something around that. But you won't get a torque wrench in on these middle ones anyway. So then I would connect the carburetor back up. In this one, it's a really nice, easy push-fit connector. That's sort of a bayonet. That's a jiffy type fitting. It's called. It's very useful if you want to just take the carb off quickly. Throttle cable I'm actually going to replace, and then the only other bit I've got down here is the throttle position sensor. Again, probably a bit of something you wouldn't have on most cars. So that's that side now done. Just the final 2 bits actually. It's these are the hoses for the breather system. So these just push into place. There's no sort of pressure in these hoses. It's just the engine breather system that has to go into a catch tank. There we go. So that's those all back together. I'll just a little bit of oil was just dripped on those. So we've got a top hose to go onto the radiator. This just pushes onto. So it needs to go one way first and then back the other. So I'm just going to move that hose clip right out of the way. So I think that should allow me. There we go. So that's sat in place there now. Just make sure you've got the obviously the hose clip over the tube underneath properly. Just use a little 7mm ratchet to do these up. I just find it's a bit easier than a screwdriver. Okay, that's our top hose back in place on that side now. If our oil filter is fitted and we've got our sump plug back in place, we can now start to top up the oil in the car. I have got a whole video covering the MGB oil change procedure, which is going to be on the link just below, but just at the bottom of the screen now. But just for now, we'll pop sort of around, it's about 4.5–5 litres that it takes. So let me get started with the first pour. I'm going to let that settle, and then we'll check it again for topping up. The other thing, we've got to refill the water as well. Thermostat's back in place, top hose is tight, so there shouldn't be any reason why we can't start putting the antifreeze back into the car. Filling the coolant on these cars is fairly straightforward. This one we've got a rear fill radiator. Some of the later chrome bumper cars you might have a filler at the front there instead. The system itself, I tend to put around 5 litres, and you want to, if you haven't got this this little catch tank here, the top of the radiator here acts as the catch tank, so you don't want to fill this up too much if you haven't got the bottle for it to go into. I would tend to sort of go to the lower part of the sort of the filler tube. If you see the water on there and it's sort of steady, then you've probably put enough in. But just going to pour away. This watering can does tend to leak a little bit, so we'll try not to lose too much if we can. So what I run in this car is actually a Silcoline Pro coil, which is a ready mixed motorcycle coolant. It actually works really well, I find, in these. I have tried things like the Evans Waters coolant, but that really was a disaster. It's fine until it gets hot, then it just does not cool down. So I've been using this for a while now. I imagine, you know, water in a usual sort of glycol antifreeze will be absolutely fine. So the watering can's 5 litre capacity, so we're going to fill it all the way up with it. And also, I have spilled a bit of it on the floor. I will wipe it up straight away. It's very slippy, the coolant, especially if you get a bit of water mixed with it as well. So you certainly don't want it on a smooth concrete floor. Just see how we're getting on. This is last year's coolant that I'm just using again. So I'm going to probably stop there because that's getting towards the bottom. There's a little bit of sediment and things in it. But there we go. So that's topped up now. We are using last year's coolant. Reason is I think until I've got the engine hot, I just want to make sure we've got no problems, no leaks or anything. And then once I've sort of given it a good run, what I'll be doing, I'll be retorquing the head, rechecking these the rocker assembly there, and probably changing the coolant out as well. So I'll just give this a wipe down, and we'll see how we're getting on with the oil. So I've just check the oil level. It's on the bottom of the dipstick, which for today is absolutely fine. When I come to start the engine, what I tend to do, obviously you'll see in the oil change video, but I spin it over without the plugs in, just to check we've got pressure before going any further. For now though, that's our work complete. We've got our head back on, coolant's topped up, oil's topped up. I haven't got any fuel in the car at the moment, but we'll be looking at buying some very shortly. I hope that you've enjoyed the video and that it proves useful to you if you're doing the same work on your car. As always, add any questions or comments in the sections below. We're hoping to be back racing at the middle of July. 18th I think is our first time out. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to see more workshop videos and more of the racing videos once the season starts. Many thanks, bye.